So because people always ask this, yes, the slides will be available. We will add them to your Salesforce portal, but maybe by tomorrow, for sure by next week, by early next week. And then we'll also download the recording and put that up there as well. That might need a little more time for that, to get it downloaded and uploaded back up, but that'll be on your Salesforce portal as well. Part of what I am here to do today is just to kind of introduce folks to the different roles that the TASA staff and contractors will be taking in supporting you through this grant year. And then I'll be kind of passing it off to them, and I'll let them introduce themselves. Actually, I'm going to pause right now and go ahead and let Peggy and Annette introduce themselves. Peggy, do you want to start?
Hi, I'm Peggy Helton, and working on this grant. I'll probably be your first point of contact for Salesforce. So if you have trouble doing an RFR or a budget adjustment or want me to walk through one of those with you, I'm happy to do that. Answer questions. Oh, I'll let Tim do his thing about all the roles, but best way to contact us is SASP@TASA.org, because there's 3 of us that really look at that email. So if we can't answer you, then one of the other team can. Yeah, so happy to be here.
Annette, want to introduce yourself, Annette?
Yeah, I'm Annette Burris Clay, and I'm the grant manager for SASP. So I'm going to generally be your first point of contact if you're having any programming issues or questions. If you're wanting to change the scope of something that you're doing, then you would contact me so I could make sure that what you're proposing is something that's still allowable with these funds. I'm also the person, if you put in a request for a budget adjustment or adding new line items, I'm the first one that will accept those or deny those, and before the finance people end up approving them. So if you have any questions, I would also suggest that you might just email me first, so that you don't end up doing a lot of work that gets denied and then you have to start over, because it's not a real simple system for editing, and I'm just trying to save you some work there. So reach out anytime you have any questions.
So that's Annette and Peggy. Some of you may also know Roger Hingarani. He unfortunately, due to the ARP grant ending, he's no longer on staff, but we are able to continue to contract with him. And so part of what TASA is required to do as part of our grant administration is to do financial audits of a certain percentage of programs every year. And so Roger's going to be helping us out with the kind of formal grantee financial audits each year. So we'll probably end up doing somewhere around 5 or 6 of those each year, and he'll be doing the more formal of those. And then can you advance the slide, Peggy? Again, my name is Tim Love. I'm kind of general oversight of the grant administration. I'll do most of the communications with our funder, which is the governor's office. And then if you have questions about like, hey, I was expecting this reimbursement, or this reimbursement isn't, for the amount that I thought it would be, those are the kinds of questions that I'll usually end up being the one to answer. And then Annette is definitely that first point of contact for kind of programmatic, allowable grant requirements. But Peggy and I both also have that knowledge, and so we may jump in from time to time depending on Annette's availability. So we usually do a pretty good job about responding to emails at that SASP@TASA.org within 24 hours. And so if there's somebody who's not available, then somebody else will jump in. And then I just wanted to mention a couple of other folks that you may hear from at some point or might hear us reference. Mark Hernandez is our nonprofit finance specialist at TASA. And a couple of the financial audits we do each year are a little more kind of TA focused. So we'll kind of go through the process like an audit, but we don't kind of have the formal findings. And it's just a little bit more focused on helping folks identify areas where they can strengthen their financial policies and practice. So he'll be doing some of those. Additionally, if we ever have really kind of detailed or nuanced questions about like financial policy and practice and what's allowable or expected at the federal level, because again, these funds start at the federal level, then we may bring Mark in to help out with that. And then finally, Amelia Romo, also Fortify. Amelia is on staff and Fortify is our contractor for our Salesforce portal. If we get really kind of complicated Salesforce portal concerns or problems, then you may hear from them from time to time as well. Most of the time that'll be Peggy. We can, handle a vast majority of those things like resetting folks' passwords and, that kind of stuff, if that's needed, or troubleshooting RFRs. But if for some reason there's something on the back end of Salesforce that's much more technical, then you may hear from Amelia or Fortify on those. So that's kind of the team. Again, we're all here to support you and the great work that you're doing to hopefully make the kind of back end admin side as painless and and to take as little time as possible, while also making sure that we keep this program in really good standing with our funders and then at the federal level, which we've been able to do for the years that we've been administering this. With that, I will turn it over to Annette to kind of walk through the grant requirements.
Okay, great. Thank you, Tim.
Yeah.
So the Sexual Assault Services Formula Grant, or SASP, is a federal grant that is received through the Texas Office of the Governor. And then TASA ends up being the pass-through to the agencies to administer this. So of course that does include subcontracting with y'all as organizations. So and then making sure that all the grant activities that we've agreed on as a state collectively are being completed. Now, I know some of you have probably already received a ridiculous amount of emails from me and Peggy. And tell you we really aren't super nitpickers by nature, but we do know that the federal guidelines, they're no joke. We are working really hard to keep, both TASA and y'all within bounds. And so, please know that we really don't enjoy sending, repeat emails saying the same thing. And I don't know that it's been very frequent that we're like 1 month inside a new grant year, and some of you have probably received, 10 emails from us already. So just know that's not our normal working style, but we're just trying to get all the ducks in a row here. So the grants to go to both rape crisis centers, and also there is funding for some culturally specific programs to be able to provide some sexual assault victim services as well, and to help improve that access to the culturally specific sexual assault services. So we know that there are some gaps in services statewide, and that there are some communities that don't reach out to a kind of standard rape crisis center to the frequency that they need to. So we want to make sure that there are folks out there who are being funded that are available to provide those kind of services that are specifically tailored to those communities. This funding is also very specific to adult survivors. It's for adult survivors who are not being sexually assaulted by a household member, by someone who, that they're in any kind of intimate partner relationship with. So again, I know that's a little different than some of the other funders, but it's very specific to us. Also, if you're like the finance person who's not necessarily doing the work, Just know that the Attorney General's office also has a grant with the SASP acronym, just to make it very confusing for folks. So you can know that there is a difference between those two. And we are the ones that are going to the governor's office, just to put a fine point on that. And we can advance that one. So the project period starts October 1st. It'll end September 30th for this first year. You get funded 12 months initially, but you will be funded assuming two things. One, that we don't have any huge issues and you've been able to, do what you said you were going to do and stay afloat and, be responsible with your grant funds and all those kinds of things that would be normally expected from any funder. And also, whether the federal funds are still available. We obviously can't offer funding if the feds cut off a program. But assuming none of these bad things happen, then you will be funded for a second year non-competitively. So we only do the competitive process every 2 years. So, at this point, we fully anticipate that all of you will be getting a second year of funding. And that next grant year obviously also starts October 1st through September 30th the next year. So who was funded? We had 2 culturally specific organizations that received funding and 13 sexual assault programs for 15 organizations total. Also, it's important to know that we did make some accommodations for rural border programs and make sure that we had enough geographic diversity here so that every region would have a program that was funded, because we know that there are, we didn't want to set up a situation where, let's say, if it was region, B or region D or whatever, that they wrote the proposals that ended up scoring the highest. But now we've concentrated all our sexual assault resources in a very limited geographic area. So we made sure that there was accommodations made, that our border area, our rural areas, and all the regions had some representation of folks doing this work. If not, we know that the urban and suburban areas tend to have an advantage there. Okay. The purpose of the grant, and you're going to see this on multiple slides, but I'm not going to read it every time because I know y'all can read. But I do want to make sure that you kind of understand, again, where we're coming from. It's direct services. That's important because there's other work that you're doing, critical work that you're doing, but it can't be paid for on this grant. So it's direct services to adult sexual assault survivors who have been assaulted by someone other than a family or household member. I also want to mention, though, that adults molested as children are eligible to receive services. So I know that's a question that comes up fairly frequently. Know if somebody reaches out to your organization, they were sexually assaulted as a child by a family member, but that's what they're reaching out for services for, was that victimization. You can work with them. Okay. So rape crisis centers must provide these SASP services primarily to these survivors of sexual assault. Again, we know that's what rape crisis centers do. So the culturally specific organizations must also provide those SASP services. So again, a direct service to primarily adult survivors of sexual violence, but from whatever underserved population that their organization serves. I'm letting the rape crisis centers know that because sometimes I think there's the assumption that the culturally specific organizations aren't providing those services per se, and they are. It's the same population, same services, it's just in a different community here. Implement the activities as approved in your project summary work plan. I think that's important. Please seek approval if you're trying to change activities. We know occasionally somebody has to shift gears. There's something specific that's happened in your community that makes your original proposal, you know, very difficult to complete as written. We are open to making common sense kinds of changes, but you do need to seek approval rather than just, you know, stop doing it. Okay. Next. So you can do some limited services to teens and young adults, and we're talking 14 to 17-year-olds. It's particular if these survivors are from underserved populations, but frankly, anybody on certain situations can work with this population. We want to make sure that it's a, you know, a small amount of folks. We don't want to end up getting a report from you at some point that's showing that 80% of the people that you're working with are 14 to 17-year-olds, because that won't fly. And you absolutely cannot serve children under the age of 14. And that's important, again, because at one point during the year, you're going to be providing demographic data and telling us the age of your survivors. And when I get reports that say 0 to 5-year-olds or, you know, 6 to 10-year-olds, this is not an appropriate use of SASP funds, and you will be asked to remove all of those. And that does trigger something for us, that you're perhaps either, you know, not doing what you're supposed to be doing with the money, or that perhaps you might need some further training because whoever's filling out the report isn't as clear about who the person actually doing the work and what they're doing. So we're not going to jump to conclusions there, but we were certainly going to ask questions. There is an exception. If you're an organization that does not receive any HHSC funding, then you can work with adult sexual assault survivors who have been sexually assaulted by a family member, intimate partner. But if you have HHSC funding, you cannot. And to be clear, if you are serving that person, you're serving them for their sexual assault victimization and not family violence victimization. So I'm hoping that this will be made very clear if it isn't already. And I think those of you who've been receiving these funds for multiple years, that's already pretty clear for you. Okay. So some of the eligible activities for this grant: licensed professional counseling for less than 1 year, individual and group therapy. We know this is one of those things that I think virtually everyone who's got a grant is doing pieces of that. Casework, non-licensed counseling, different kinds of advocacy and support. So whether that's legal advocacy, that's hospital-based, you know, accompaniment and advocacy, or sometimes with different kind of social service agencies, that type of thing. But it's also not limited to kind of your traditional counseling options. You can use non-traditional modalities. We know that you're dealing with the unique needs of survivors. I'm looking at Jul's picture here, so I know you do a lot of the yoga therapy stuff. You may have folks who are doing equine therapy. You may have folks who are doing healing circles. There's different types of healing work that is being done across the state. Those things are fine. In fact, obviously encouraged, because we know one size doesn't fit everyone here. You're also free to use outside contractors to perform those duties. I know some folks, especially if they have a problem hiring full-time staff, or they have a lot of turnover, or some other, you know, complications that come up, it just makes more sense for them to hire contractors to do some of these direct services. That all is allowable. Peer support groups, work with that type of work is also an eligible activity under SASP. Hotline services, providing crisis intervention, providing information and referrals to sexual assault survivors. Yes, that's all eligible. And a lot of these things obviously are going to be in your original funding requests that went out. So we'll talk about that in a minute. Advocacy and accompaniment, again, we talked about that. Crisis intervention, emotional support that is short-term and longer group support activities, safety planning. I think safety planning is one of the areas where our dual programs probably have done this longer, because it's something that people look at as being a tool that you use with family violence victims, but you can use it with sexual assault victims. And so even if you're a standalone rape crisis center, that work of doing that safety planning is in many cases essential. So it is an eligible activity. Case management, service coordination, obviously that you can provide the services both to the survivor, but also any significant others or secondary victims of that adult victim, and non-offending family or household members. Community-based services and support mechanisms. We know that the folks who are coming to you are coming with multiple needs that can't always be individually met through services at your agency. And so some of the work you do is actually coordinating with other folks in your community who's providing these services as well. That's all eligible. Development and distribution of materials. This needs to be related to the services, all the kinds of things that we just talked about, all those eligible activities. You can't make training manuals. You can't do, volunteer manuals. You can't do like sexual assault 101 kind of brochures and things like that. You can't do media campaigns and that type of thing, but you can make brochures and flyers and things that you might need that you would distribute in your community to let them know that you're there and what you can do for them. So again, printing is eligible, but no, we may be asking you some follow-up questions to find out exactly what that is, because what we don't want to happen is to have a situation where you've been reimbursed for something and then we have to ask you for the money back because the state asked us for the money back. So we try to handle that at the front end. Okay. So population-specific focus services. I know there's been a lot of concern about a lot of the DEI certifications and things that you've signed, but please know that it's still okay to respect the values, the behaviors, the expectations, the norms of the community at a service delivery level here. So that work is fine. What we're trying to do is make sure that the language that we use, the materials that we develop, show that we are open to providing services for everyone in the community that needs them. And then another eligible cost is the equipment that you would need to provide these services. We know your counselors, your advocates and stuff, they're going to need laptops, they need telephones, things like that. So obviously those are things that can be charged to this grant as well. All right. So survivor support, this is something that if you had a SASP grant or an ARP grant in the past, you're familiar with being able to spend these grant funds on this, but it can include everything from supplies that you keep on hand for survivors. So you may have change of clothes or hygiene kits or things like that that you're using, at the hospital, that kind of thing. Also items purchased for specific survivors. So that might be a situation where you're replacing bedding for someone, or you're getting new locks for someone's home, or you have a survivor who now can't get to work because or can't find a job or get to an interview because, you know, she has, you know, 4 bald tires on her car, and you need to help her maneuver this situation. So these would be items that you may have purchased for a specific survivor. And then third-party payments are payments that you made on behalf of survivors. So that could be a utility bill. You know, that could be a deposit on a new apartment because she's trying to get out of wherever she lived, where she was felt unsafe because the assault happened there. You know, all those kinds of things. And you can think of more examples than I can, I'm sure. But these are all things that you can do. Now, if you're doing relocation stuff, we know that a lot of these expenses can be paid for through crime victims compensation. This is not intended to be a substitute for crime victims compensation. So, but some folks didn't report their assault. They don't qualify for crime victims comp, or sometimes it's a matter of timing. If crime victims comp is at the point where they're taking 4 months to approve something, sometimes we know folks don't have 4 months to wait. So, you know, kind of look at those individual situations. And if it's not clear and you're worried that you might be making an error, again, drop us an email. We'd be happy to kind of walk through this with you and problem solve. Okay. Some types of survivor support, just again, to put a finer point on it, child care expenses, travel expenses, food, including culturally appropriate food. It is important to know that you can't have a, let's say you're doing a support group or you're doing art therapy or something, you can't buy refreshments for meetings and things like that. That's not allowable. But if you were trying to buy specific food, for instance, for a client, then you certainly can use your funding for this. Utility assistance. As far as utility assistance, again, it needs to be related to the sexual assault. So if they're in arrears 4 months before they were sexually assaulted, you can't pay back what happened prior to that. So it's what can you do for the bill that's due now, or what can you do for the bill that's upcoming and the person's not working. This is not intended, there's just not enough funding there to be used for every situation that the folks you're working with might need, but hopefully in the situations where it does work, that money is available. A lot of security measures, folks have paid for replacing cell phones, putting up security cameras, re-keying locks, those kinds of things that, again, feel directly related to their sense of safety and well-being. Okay. So only if you're a culturally specific organization, a culturally based organization, you can conduct a minimal amount of outreach for the purpose of getting information out to the community about the services you provide. Again, that's not because we don't value outreach. You know, frankly, we think it's essential to doing the work. But the fact is, this funding is to provide a direct service. And so if you're doing outreach or training and things like that, it will not be counted. It's not eligible, and it's not something that we should really even be seeing in a narrative on your report. The culturally specific organizations have a little bit of a unique situation where there's a lot of folks who are not even aware that their organization provides these services at all. It's usually not in the name of their organization, that type of thing. So we realize they may be going to, certain festivals or fairs or things that have a lot of people from the community they're serving there, and they may be there letting folks know that I'm in town and I'm here, and this is something else that we can do for you that you might not be aware of. All right. So,
Annette, can I say
was there
something real quick?
questions? Absolutely.
Yeah, just to go back to the kind of direct support of survivors, so the items kept on hand or specific. That's one of those things that part of the reason that lots of grants haven't allowed that in the past is that at the federal level, they see that as like one of the areas that's a little more vulnerable to misuse. And so we always just really encourage folks to have really strong policies and practices in place to make sure that those resources are being distributed equitably, right? That you don't have like two survivors that end up kind of using up all of your budget for that you're thinking about how do you make it accessible to folks? How do you distribute it equally? And then how do you keep really good, strong controls on how it's distributed? And that, again, is just because from the federal level, that's one of the things that they really look at. And why a lot of grants don't allow it is because they see that as a place where folks can kind of misuse that. So I just wanted to say that kind of real quick. And if you have questions or many of you may have been doing this either through ARP or through SASP funding already, and so you may already have something in place, but that's also something we're more than happy to look at or to help folks develop if it's not something you already have in place.
Hey, Annette.
So, yeah, I see the question in the chat.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, so this is an interesting question. I think sometimes this is going to depend on how there is no rule that says where you can be doing your services. So if the person is going with the intent that they're there to provide a direct service to anyone who discloses, what I would do is I would just make sure that when you're putting the narrative that you're very clear that the person is there to provide a direct service. They're not facilitating, they're not passing out flyers and brochures, doing all those kinds of things. There's no rule about you have to be providing a service in the office. But I'd be careful with this one because whether you're facilitating or not, if you're tabling and you're doing essentially what is outreach work, I think it's a slippery slope. So make sure that it's very clear to the individual that they're there to provide that direct service should it be needed. And when you end up reporting it, I wouldn't say we were at a outreach event. You're using certain words that are going to trigger things. And if you're very clear that you're only there to provide direct services for survivors that end up coming forward because there's other people there providing, training, outreach, those kinds of things, let common sense and your conscience be your guide on that. That's all I can say. All right. So some of the other ineligible activities, anything that compromised victim safety and recovery or undermines offender accountability. So I have not seen an issue with our programs trying to do that. I think this has been an issue more in a few other states where folks are doing victim offender mediation and those kinds of programs, and that you absolutely can't do that on SASP funding. But I can tell you that I've not seen any of our programs over the last several years ever attempt to do that with SASP funding. But it's an important thing to see, and obviously you did sign a certification on that. So if there's any prohibition imposed by the federal, state, local law or regulation, so again, if you would not be doing programming trying to get around the federal laws, whether you agree with them, you don't agree with them. Just know what the certifications are that you signed. Know that you want to be careful, and that sometimes just the words you use is what's going to matter. And, you know, these are federal rules. They're not TASA rules, but it's going to be very sometimes challenging for folks who've been doing a lot of social change, social justice work, to know that we are kind of keeping things on a almost a criminal justice level, with a lot of the wording that is used here. So if you have questions on that, certainly feel free to email or even call. We can talk it over and figure it out, how to keep us to do the work that we need to do, and also stay within the bounds of what's legal to do as well. Okay. So cash payments to victims, gift cards, fuel vouchers is not allowed. Some of that seems like it should be. It would make sense to be able to give fuel vouchers and gift cards in certain situations. Unfortunately, those are things that have either perceived to or actually have caused problems in other organizations across the country, where there has perhaps been activities that have occurred or misappropriations of some of these funds. So, you know, the feds actually a few years ago, you know, curtailed a lot of this just because it was, you know, a potential for to be misused and misappropriated. And so they just cut it out. So there's other ways of doing that. You can fill up somebody's tank if that needs to happen. You certainly can take money and go buy groceries for someone or do those things, but just handing over the cash or the voucher or the gift card is not an allowable activity or expense. Construction, I don't think I've seen anybody try to get any kind of construction done with this. Like I said yesterday, you can't build a ballroom, you can't do anything with these funds. So we know specifically what they're for, and it's not for that. Fundraising, I think we've not had an issue with people trying to do fundraising with these funds in the past. I don't anticipate that this new year is going to be any differently, but just so that we're clear, fundraising can't be done. All right. Leasing or purchasing vehicles. That one I think is a pretty self-explanatory. Liability insurance on buildings. So this one is a little more complicated for folks because a lot of times people bundle their insurance. So they have a variety of types of professional liability and personal liability and liability on their building. This grant does not pay building liability. So if you have a package of insurance bundled and you're trying to get a percentage of it paid for on this grant, please take out the building liability insurance portion of it and then have the other portion paid percentage-wise with your grant. So we can pay the other pieces, but we can't pay the building liability. Lobbying, again, I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Medical services, forensic medical exams, prophylaxis, none of this can be paid for on this grant. This is counterintuitive to a lot of folks. I get that, but those were the rules that were made a few years ago, and we're stuck with them. Purchase of real property, physical modifications to buildings, so even minor renovations. We've had folks who wanted to like soundproof a counselor's office things like that. Again, it may seem like it's very related to the direct service you're providing, but even those minor renovations can't be covered with this. So be real careful with that. And if you're in doubt, again, just shoot us an email or a phone call if you're more comfortable with the phone than the email, with whatever works for you. And we're happy to walk through that with you. All right. So okay, so the only one we haven't included here is reimbursing staff. I think this is one that has caught some folks by surprise. Somebody will go and buy, lunch for a survivor after they get out of the hospital, or they go buy the survivor something they need, a pair of shoes or whatever, and then they want to be reimbursed. Unfortunately, reimbursing staff and making a check out to the staff for something is something that sends up a red flag to the feds, and we can't reimburse like that. So make sure you kind of go through your third-party payments, or you've got your company credit card or something that's a little bit more official. So reimbursing staff is going to be problematic. Okay. Some of the out-of-scope activities, the funding announcement, which is actually in your portal also. If you don't have a hard copy of it, I use both because sometimes one's easier than the other, or I tell myself that because I'm ancient. So having a hard copy is something I can't get away from. But especially pages 10 and 11, I think can be particularly helpful to you. I would tab those so that I think 90% of your questions on things that are eligible or ineligible will be answered for you right there on page 10 or 11. Not everything, but certainly a great place to start. And if you're awarded, you'll be required to complete the letter signed by an authorized official certifying that the grant funds will not be used for out-of-scope activities. So essentially, you're saying things like, we're not doing education, we're not doing the outreach, we're not doing social media campaigns, we're not training professionals, those kinds of things. You're telling them you're not doing that with your SASP money. So it's very important that if you've signed a letter saying you're not doing those things, that you don't even accidentally then include those activities in the narrative on your grant report. And we see that's happening with some frequency. And I think most of the time it could just be, an innocent error that you have a different person who's filling the forms out and submitting the reports than the person doing the work, and somebody's cutting and pasting. But please, if you're the person who is submitting those reports, take a double look, go through it, make sure that you're not including things that you didn't intend to include in your report. Okay? So all your certifications, I think I made the whole call go over long yesterday by going into too much detail about all those. But page 15 of that same funding announcement will give you a reminder of those certifications that you've signed, and gives you an idea if you're like, I'm not sure if this is something we can do or should do, or did I tell them we wouldn't do it? Go through, take a check, look at page 15 and review that real quick, and I think that'll answer most of those questions as well. All right. So we tried to simplify your budget and your grant and the way this all works. I feel that TASA did a couple of things really well this year. I think one of the things, I think they do a couple of really good things every year, don't get me wrong, but one of the things that I appreciate is that we had limited folks to essentially 10% of their total grant award could be used for administration, overhead, equipment, all those kinds of things. We've changed that to a more reasonable percentage. We recognize that not only was that difficult for y'all to stay within those bounds, it was also, frankly, difficult for us to go through and look, especially when you have personnel that may be doing both support activities and direct services, for us to determine how much of their time was being spent on each one. And also recognizing that, especially with a lot of the smaller agencies, your executive staff is actually doing a whole lot of direct services that may not happen in a very large urban program where they're busy doing lots of other things. So we just want to make sure that it was a little easier for you to develop a budget, for us to understand what it was. And so that figure is up to 35%. We also hopefully always had a difficult time defining what's administrative, what's overhead, what's supervisory, what's equipment that we need. Now it's all put in there. It's either a direct service or it's everything else. So I think in the long run that makes it a lot simpler. And then 10% of your budget, up to 10% of your budget, can be spent on that survivor support piece. So that's 35% for those other activities, 10%, up to 10% on survivor support, and then obviously the other 55% would be spent on direct services. No, you can spend more than that on direct services, but you can't spend more than that on your activities. So sometimes when folks will put in for a budget adjustment, they will ask for money to be moved, and they've exceeded their percentage that's allowed. And so you end up getting denied, not because the expense would normally be denied, but because you've exceeded your percentages. So be careful on that. I know some of you are right up to the 35% right now, so you really have no leeway. If you want to move something into those other support activities into that category, you're going to have to take other things out of that category, or you're going to exceed it. So be careful with that. Other folks only are spending like 20%, so they've got 15% leeway that they could make adjustments during the year. So just know we do look at that. We don't just look at it with the initial budget, but we look at it during the year when you request a budget adjustment as well. And ask questions again, because I hate to see you go through all that work and then you hit deny and then you have to redo it, which I may then say, well, some of these are fine and some of them aren't. Sometimes you have enough money for some of them, but not all of them, but I don't know what your priorities are. So, again, dropping an email prior to doing that may save you a lot of work in the long run. So, no, you don't have to do that, but it may end up saving you some work in the long run to do it that way. Okay.
And there's a question in the chat.
Oh.
Excuse me. Can you clarify on the letter, the authorized official may be asked to sign certifying grant funds will not be used on ineligible items? Was this part of the contract? Was it required already and maybe in the future? It has not been required already. It was part of the contract, just saying you may have to do it. And when you do your reports, you'll be signing off that you're attesting that you're not doing any of those activities. Tim, did you want to add something else?
Yeah, I was going to say this is a new thing, and it's coming from the federal level. It's basically all those things that are on page 15, the out of scope activities. And so the governor's office is actually a little unsure yet about what they're gonna have to do and what they're gonna have to require us to do, and how much of that has to come down to y'all. So we're hopeful that kind of the certifications that you all signed as part of the application kit will cover it, but there may be a time that we come back with a template to sign. It shouldn't be anything new. Again, it's basically those items, out of scope activities that are listed on page 15. So it won't be anything new. And as soon as we know, we'll pass something forward to y'all. But there's nothing you need to do about that now. And in many ways, we think it's kind of covered because you guys authorized officials sign, certifications attesting to what's in the funding announcement, including those out of scope activities when you applied. So we'll let you know. That's one of those things that I think everyone's kind of waiting, the waiting is moving up the line, right? They're waiting to see what they have to do at the state level and then what they have to pass down to us.
I equate it with like some of the laws that we tend to pass on the state and federal level where we're really serious, we mean this. So it's already a law, but we pass another law that says we're going to follow the law. So I think it's going to, that's what it looks like to me, but we'll see. Hopefully we won't need that redundancy, but we might. All right. So your reports are completed in form assembly. I think form assembly has been reported to me to be simple. People don't think that the quarterly reports take too much time. The annual report that goes to the Fed takes a little bit longer because that includes a lot of demographic data. But the quarterly reports themselves, and it's good that they don't take much time because we don't give you much time to do it. To be totally frank, the problem is the governor's office and probably the feds to them have set the deadlines on them, and they literally are due on the 15th of every month. And you see, we're giving you to the 14th, the 13th, the 14th. That's because then we have to take all your reports and compile them into one report. We also have to have enough time that we can call and say, what? If you have something on there that doesn't make sense or is doing an ineligible activity or is including maybe children or, those kinds of things. So we would have to be able to call and clarify. So I can tell you from personal experience, that's a very busy day. The 15th is a very busy day. So, honestly, TASA has given you every day we possibly could give you to finish it. Do I think it's enough time? No, I do not. I think it's considering, you're dealing with crises day in and day out. We don't want to create another one by putting an unreasonable timeline on. But just know, frankly, it wasn't our idea. And we're doing the best we can because we're only taking one day. And that one day is sometimes on a Saturday or a Sunday, and we're using it. Sorry about that. Seriously. The first quarter report, if you're a new program and you didn't receive SASP last year, your first quarter report is only actually going to include 2 months. It'll include October and November. If you received funds from SASP last year, yours would include September, October, and November. So yes, you're splitting 2 different grant years. You're taking data from 2 different years and you're putting it together on one report because we're doing what we're told. So, and I don't do what I'm told without questioning it very often. So I know it doesn't make sense. A quarter should have 3 months. So again, if you're a program who received SASP funding last year, yours will include September, October, and November. All you new folks, it'll just be October and November for that very first report. After that, we'll get back into a more logical sequence here, 3 months, and it's due 2 weeks later. The annual report, now again, that's the one that you do directly to the Violence Against Women office. That is on a calendar year. Again, they didn't ask anybody in the field because we would have told them that doesn't make sense that you are on a calendar year which splits 2 grant years. But that's neither here nor there. It's a calendar year. So some of you, if you were brand new, when you do this report, you may only be including October, November, and December on your annual report. And those of you who had funding last year will be including the entire 12 months of 2025. It's generally due in early February. They don't generally let TASA know until late December or early January. But if Tim finds out sooner, he will let you know sooner. This one gives you a little more time. Usually they'll give us about a month ahead of time. Like I said, generally it's early February. A lot of times it's around the 5th or 6th of February, 7th of February. We had one year it came several months later because they made changes to the form. Because they just made changes a couple of years ago, I don't anticipate that happening, but I've been surprised before. So as soon as we know, we'll let you know. Our best guess again is early February. Okay. All right, your client assistance tracking logs for expenses. So TASA will provide the tracking log. I believe Peggy's the one that develops this tracking log. So if you have specific questions about it, I'm sure she will answer those for you. But there are 3 categories. You're essentially going to have a section on supply budget category. So this would be, you know, those supplies that you keep on hand in case survivors need them during the year. It would include the items purchased for specific survivors, which is under your ODOE budget category, and then those third-party payments, which is in a different budget category as well. Now, these are going to be due 3 days prior to your RFR coming in. And the reason for that is we know that a lot of folks will submit their RFR on the last day. We get a lot of them that come in on the 14th and 15th. And we absolutely love those of you who get them in earlier. So that's always an option, but we are also realistic. We know a lot of them come in those last couple of days. The problem is if you do your RFR and we find an issue with something on your tracking log, it's going to hold up your payment, and we don't want to hold up your payment. We know folks need to get reimbursed in a timely manner. So what we're doing is we're hoping to get that in enough time that if there's any questions, any discrepancy, anything that we need to follow up on, we've asked you that prior to getting your RFR because we, again, don't want to hold up your money because we only reimburse folks monthly. So if there's a problem, if you submit your RFR late, if it gets held up for something, you may not get paid for an additional 30 days on top of that. And I think that can be very difficult for especially the smaller programs. So we don't want to set you up like that. So anytime it's possible, please get those in 3 days prior to that. So if you submit on the 10th, we're hoping that we have it by the 7th. This is going to more impact the folks who tend to go to the very end. So, because we have a little bit of time, if we get it early, but if we get it at the last minute and there's questions, it's going to be problematic. Peggy, is there something you wanted to add about that? I know.
For those of you who had this tracking log, you've been doing it like last year for SARPs or ARPSA, it is going to look different. We're just finishing it up right now, so we'll get that out to you. And it's going to be due monthly. I know most of y'all did it quarterly before, so just a note that's going to be due monthly this time. And hopefully it's going to be a little bit easier. That's it. Okay.
And it's your turn.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Annette. So we're gonna do a little walkthrough through Salesforce. And for those of you who don't know, Salesforce is a program that we use that you submit your request for reimbursements. You'll submit your budget adjustment request in Salesforce, and then we see it on our end, and then we can approve them right in Salesforce. So I put the link to Salesforce. It's in the presentation, but I also put it in the chat. We'll send that out to you. All organizations, all grantees have one designated Salesforce user. So those have already been set up. Your designated Salesforce user should be able to go in Salesforce right now. The budgets are there. You'll be able to see them. There's only one per grantee, so if you will decide if you want to share that with other folks in your agency, you can do that. I'm going to stop sharing so I can start sharing Salesforce. So okay. So first of all, what I'm going to do is actually go to what you're going to see when you follow. Oh, did not do that. Hold on. Okay, it is not letting me follow the link because I'm already signed in, but let me start sharing and I'll show you what you will see. Okay, so when you follow that link, the first thing you're going to get is a login, and it's going to ask you to put in your password. And when you do, you're going to come to this page called the home page. And so it's going to list all of your grants. Your SASP grant that is active should be on top, but if you've had other grants like down here, you'll see that they're closed. It'll be listed there as well. First, I want to take you up to the top because you're actually at home right here. And if you go any other place, you can click back to get here. If you click this grants section, it's going to show you your grants in kind of a list. It'll show you like the year, what status it is. Manage means that it's active. And then this reports tab actually will let you do reports according to your grant. And I think we're going to kind of clean this up because it still has some old ones in here, but let's just say you wanted your budget by line item. You go up here to report, you can click on this, and it's going to run you a report of your budget by line item. So see, this is the grant, and then you can actually export this data over here on the right-hand side. So if you want that report, you can export that data and have that report. And there are several reports that are available. So your remaining funds, you can do that by line item, your reimbursements. And then this tab is a support tab that if you have issues with Salesforce, you can do, you can fill this out, do a description, what issue you're having, and submit it, and it comes directly to us. And so then we can see what issues you're having with Salesforce. If you are trying to do an RFR and it's 5 o'clock on the 15th, I wouldn't use this. I would do the saps@tasa.org because that comes directly to us. And so we can immediately kind of help you get signed in to Salesforce if that's ever a question. Over here are frequently asked questions where we're almost ready to have them live. So when those are live, you'll see those frequently asked questions there. So I'm going to go back to home and open up, because we did a test organization grant so that you can see so that we can walk through. I want to draw your attention over here to the right-hand side. This is your grant information. So it gives you the time your reporting is due. It gives you information about reimbursements, really the timeline and reimbursements. So it also gives you due dates. So reimbursements are due the 15th of every month. This is new. If the 15th falls on a weekend, it's actually due the Friday before the weekend. So it might be due on the 13th if the 15th is a Sunday, or the 14th is the 15th is a Saturday. And then it'll kind of tell you, like, if you don't have any expenses, then you should do a zero request RFR. And then the RFR submitted after the due date cannot be paid until the next month's cycle. So those due dates are really firm. They're firm because we gather all that information and get it to our funders so that they can reimburse us, so we can reimburse you. So that 15th is just a really firm deadline. So let's walk through down here. It kind of tells you, like, it tells you a little bit about the client assistant tracking form. So it's just good information about your grant. You're going to see this on several pages. What I've learned from being in Salesforce, because when I came here, I had no idea about Salesforce, is there are multiple ways to get multiple places. So if you ever get lost, you can just go home here and start all over. Here under reporting, when we get the reports done and they're nearing completion, we'll put a link to your report here so that you can sign in, link to your progress report, your quarterly report. Although it's in Form Assembly, that link will take you directly to your report. We'll also send that link out to you so that you have it. So let's go into this grant. When you click on your grant, you're going to see this is called the details page, and it's going to give you your organization. This right here is your grant ID. In case anyone ever asks you for it, it'll give you your grant ID. It'll tell you what fiscal year. It's going to tell you your grant contacts. So it has your authorized official, it has your grant contact, it has your Salesforce designated user. Those are the things we picked up off your application or when you designated a user. So if any of these things need to be changed, let us know. There's a process for the authorized official, so we can let you know what that process is. It's going to tell you your total approved budget, and then it's going to give you a breakdown. If you have started an request for reimbursement, which we call an RFR, if you've started that, if you've saved it, but you haven't finished it, it's going to show up in editing here. If you've finished it and you submitted, it'll show up in pending here. And then when you get done with all your RFR and you come in, you're going to be able to see what your total approved budget was. And it's also what your remaining amount is. So these things will all be present to you. Okay. Let me take you through your files tab. So,
Peggy,
oh, yes,
sorry, will you go back for just 1 second?
yes.
So near a lot of these fields, you see that little circle with looks like an eye in the middle of it. If you hover over those, it'll give you a little bit of a detail, like a little more detail, a little description of what information is included there. So that can be particularly helpful in the budget totals section, because you have editing, you have pending, you have approved. So those little information bubbles can give you a little additional information.
Okay. So your files tab, some of your information is already in your files tab. Some of it we need to upload it, but when we get through, you'll have things like your funding announcement. Your hard copy template of your report will also be in there. Client assistant tracking form will be there. Your contract will be there, your board resolution, your job descriptions that you submitted to us. Those things will all be in your files. So, and the funding announcement should already be up there. So if you're ever looking for your funding announcement, you can go to your files and it will be there. Your original budget and your project summary will be there. So if you ever need to look back on, your work plan, you can find it in your files. So your request for reimbursements will be here. When you fill one out, you'll see them as you'll see the process. So you may see them as pending. Then when we go in and accept them or approve them, you'll see the status changing. And really, accept and approve is on budget adjustments, right? Okay, but you'll see this if it's approved. If your reimbursement has been approved, you'll see it here. So budget adjustments. So a bit about budget adjustments. We have a two-step process to approve your budget adjustments. So when you enter them, Annette goes in and reviews them, and she does what is called accepted. And then the finance team, after she accepts them, the finance team goes in and approves them. So when they're approved, you're going to see them here. If you ever have a denied one, you'll see them here. You may see accepted here under the status, and that just means that Annette's already gone in and reviewed it, and she's fine with it, and it's gone over to the finance team. So it doesn't mean that there's a holdup. It just sometimes it takes us a day for that whole process to be completed. And this is new. So this will be your disbursement. So when you do your RFRs, we pay them. It's going to be a little bit of a lag time, but about a month after it's paid, then they'll show up here. So you'll be able to go back and see your reimbursements, check them against your records, make sure that everything is all right, or let us know if you have any questions. So what I want to do is just open up the budget and walk through some of these processes. So to open up the budget, you just can click here. And it's going to open up your budget on the left-hand side. It's going to give you all your line items. Here's where you can request a reimbursement or request a budget adjustment. So I'm just going to walk through requesting a reimbursement. So the first thing that you'll do is you'll select your month. So it's really important to select the month of your expenses. What you'll see when you go in here, and because we used this yesterday, you're only going to see November on here, but yesterday there was October and November. What you're going to see on a rolling month is you'll see your current month and you'll see your previous month if you did not fill out an RFR. Does that make sense? So let's say December, you come here and you're going to see November is going to be available to you. If you filled out an October one, October will not be available to you. So at any given time, you're able to do an RFR on your current month, the expenses, and your previous month expenses. Now, when it rolls over to the next month, that previous month is going to drop off. So it's really important that you do RFRs monthly because you only have that 2-month window in order to be able to submit an RFR. Does that make sense? If you go to June, like we get to January and you haven't submitted October, it will no longer be available to you. So if you have some extenuating circumstances, call us. Otherwise, you would not be able to be reimbursed for those expenses. Does that make sense? And Tim, jump in here anytime. Because we actually walked through yesterday, in October, I'm gonna click November. When you go in for your first RFR next week, it's gonna say October and you'll choose October. And then you just start or continue your RFR. So we do have to do RFRs by line item, one line item at a time. So you just click whatever line item that you want to request funding for, and you click edit. And it pops up this, and it'll tell you what's budgeted. it'll tell you your available amount, and then you put in your request. And I'm going to purposely put in something it's not going to let me do. If you try to go over that requested amount, it's going to give you an error message. And it's going to tell you that the number is too high and that you have to go under your available amount. So I'm just going to put $1,000 here. Comments. Comments are really important if you're kind of the amount that you're requesting is over what you would normally request, or it's over or really under what your budget was. If there's like a 50% variance from the last month, put an explanation in the comments, because that will keep us from having to call you and say, what is there anything going on? So use these comments, especially down here. It says, does this request include a correction to a previously submitted RFR? You can do that. Let's say you're in January and you have an advocate on your budget and you bill them for November and December, but you forgot to bill them for October. You can go in and add, let's say this request is you usually bill $500. So you bill $500 for that advocate for January. You can add $500 for that advocate for October, but you want to put it in these comments. So you say October salary, and I can't spell when folks are looking, $500, and November is $500. So that's how you can correct a previously submitted RFR. If you've overbilled an RFR, those are kind of a little bit more tricky, and you can definitely call us and we can walk you through that process. But all is not lost. If you make a mistake on an RFR, we can go back and correct it. What we want to really make sure we do is if we correct an RFR, we say yes, that we've corrected it. Because when you save it, and it comes to us, we know that includes a correction. And that really answers a lot of questions for us up front when your request might look a little different. Does that make sense? So when you come down here, you can save your progress. And so if you save your progress, it's going to switch you out of the reimbursement. But if you go back in, and you come up here, it's now going to tell you, okay, your month is in progress, and you can select that again and you can continue it. So if you put in part of your RFR, you can definitely come back and continue it. When you get down to here, if you don't have any expenses for the month, then you can submit a 0 request for reimbursement. And we just ask you to do that because that just tells us that you did fill out your RFR, but you don't have any expenses. So we're not looking for one. Does that make sense? And then once you continue to review and you submit, then it is, it's submitted. Then we see it on our side, you'll see it on your side as submitted. But at that point, you can't go back and change it. Does that make sense? At that point, if there's some horrible error that you need to correct right away, contact us and we can help you walk through that. But once you submit it, then it's on our side, and then we'll be able to see it, and you'll be able to see it if you go back into that reimbursement tab. I feel like I'm talking like a Yankee really fast. And I am from Indiana, so we do talk fast. So
I just wanted to mention two things really quickly. The reason that we set it up with that system where you can save it and then you have to submit it is that we know that in some cases, folks, like one person's entering the data and you have, because of your kind of policies and practices, you have a director or CEO has to do a final approval. Again, we're fine if you want to share like login information, and so whoever's entering it can enter it, and then the the CEO, whoever has to approve it, can come back later, take a look at it and approve it. So that's kind of why that's in place for y'all. And just a reminder, once you submit something for a month, you can't go back and submit again for that same month. So again, I know the timeline is kind of tight, and I'll either Peggy or I will talk really quickly about the timeline just so you have kind of your expectations. But so it can be hard, it can be easy to miss something, or in some cases, even something comes in after you've submitted. Reach out to us and we'll figure out how you can incorporate that into, in most cases, incorporate that into the next month's RFR rather than going back and trying to submit a second RFR for the same month, because the system is set up to only allow one per month. Which is also why it's really important that you take a second and make sure that you pick the right month. Because if you pick, you're trying to do October and you do November by accident, then when you go to November, November's not going to be available. And we can do some things on the back end to fix those things. So nothing is permanent or like catastrophic, but all things that end up taking a little bit of time and can lead to some delay for you. So.
Okay, so let's go through a budget adjustment really quickly. So if you need to do a budget adjustment, just click here and it'll take you into that form as well. If you need to add a line item, you can do that. You would need to do that first. So what you do, let's just say you need to add a new budget line item. You just put the budget line item name here. So let's say we just want utilities. And then the category would be, you pick your category and then your justification. So if you're doing a new line item, especially if you're going to do personnel, then all those things apply as to like, you want to tell us like how much time they're going to be on the grant, what's their salary, and then what's their monthly salary times percent that you're asking for. All those things would need to go in your justification. If you're doing a line item for utilities, then you would need to tell us how much your utilities are, what's your cost allocation method, and those calculations. So if you're using an FTE calculation, you would say like 3 FTEs divided by 30 FTEs of the agency equals the percentage, and that's the amount of percentage. Our utilities are $12,000 and we're using a percentage of X, whatever that is, right? So all this needs to be in the justification, because when we come to look at it, then we can see, that we can see your cost allocation, we can see how much you're going to ask for, let's so to speak. And when that gets to when that budget line item is added to your budget, all that detail is going to be there for you to see. So it's captured kind of for historical purposes. And I'm going to kind of like cheat a little bit so we can move on. But then you submit this new line item. Okay, and now you're done with your new line items and you want to move funds. So here you would choose this other one to move funds. So when you come down here, you can do a search. And I'm gonna look for, so let's say I'm gonna move something from local mileage and I'm gonna look for my new line item. See, here it is. It's utilities. So you can go ahead and do your budget adjustment for a new line item. It's not going to it's not going to be approved until Annette will go back and approve your line item, but you can go ahead and do that. So let's say I want to transfer some money. So it's going to tell me how much I have in local mileage that I can transfer. So I want to transfer $300. Okay, and then the reason that I want to do that is moving funds to utilities to pay for electricity XYZ, right? I'm a horrible speller when I'm, okay. And then, so it's more important to tell us why you're moving the funds to the budget category. Sometimes we get a lot of explanation about, like, we're no longer using local mileage, but the other half of it isn't there. So you can tell us why you're moving it out, but it's more important to get to why you're moving it into the new line item and those cost allocation methods that you used. Okay, then you submit it. And once you submit it, you're going to be able to see it switches down to the bottom and you see it as pending. This is where when Annette goes in and accepts it, it's going to change to accepted. And then when finance staff goes in and approves it, it's going to change to approved. So you'll see that as it goes along. Any questions about that? Your first RFR, if you're new to this system, your first budget adjustment, even if your 10th budget adjustment or RFR, you can definitely call and, I'm happy to walk you through it. We can do it together via Zoom. And then when you're done, you can just go back to home. And then if you want your grant details, you can go back to your grant details. Now see, now I have something in the pending funds, right? And so, and it's taken that away from my approved balance. So you'll be able to see it there. So a little bit about, I know Tim said about reimbursements. So on your grant notes, it's going to tell you when reimbursements occur. Let's see. Oh, when payments. Okay, down here under payments. So it'll tell you generally. So in this grant, reimbursements are generally within 45 days of the end of the month, which the expenses occurred. So if you submit them by the 15th or by the deadline, the 15th deadline, then you should get it within 45 days of the end of the month of when those expenses occurred. Did I say that correctly, Tim? Are you?
Yeah, so for
An easier way
example,
to say that.
like in October, well, at the end of next week, you're going to submit for October as long as you submit it by the 14th. And that's because the 15th is on a weekend. As long as you submit it by the 14th and we're able to clear and approve everything, then we turn around, we have to process it, and we submit usually between the 18th or 20th of the month to the governor's office, and the governor's office takes anywhere from kind of 6 or 7 to 11 days to turn that around, and then we take another day or two to turn that around. So by the time you're done for October, if you submit by the deadline of the 14th, then you should get reimbursed. Usually it usually ends up being that first week of December that you're getting reimbursed for October. Sometimes it'll creep into that second week, but it's usually kind of right around that first week of December for October. So 45 days is usually the longest it'll take. Sometimes holidays can impact that, but generally speaking, kind of by the middle of a month and a half, right about a month and a half later, you'll get that reimbursement. And that's why we set the deadlines to kind of try to find that balance between giving people enough time to submit and pull together the information they need, make sure all the costs come in, with also not making you wait too long for reimbursement, because again, in this case, we have to process it, then we have to get reimbursed. And once we're reimbursed, we reimburse you. So if you miss that deadline of the 15th, it doesn't mean you can't submit. You still should submit and submit as soon as you can. But know that what happens then is, like, let's say you submit on November 18th for October. Then when we get into December, and go to submit for reimbursement, we'll include that reimbursement then. So it does put it behind by about 30 days. And then the other thing to kind of know with that is if that ever happens, like going through all these scenarios, right? But like, so you submit October after the November deadline, you submit November on time for in December, then what's likely is that you'll get one reimbursement, but it'll include both October and November. So I think that's it.
Nice. Oh, good. And I see some questions. So does that mean our first RFR is due by next Friday? Yes, it's due on the 14th, since the 15th is on a holiday. So you have the end of the day, technically 11:59, right? At the end of the day on Friday. And if you're adding a staff member to the grant, do I need to submit their job description? Great question. Yes, you would just send it to saps@tasa.org. So that so when we see a new staff person come on in a new line item, we'd be looking in the SAPS email to get that job description. And for job descriptions, if you're sending it in, the easiest way to do that for us to identify is for you just to highlight the SAPS activities, because your job descriptions may include a lot of other activities that you aren't doing on this grant. So if you put the percent that you're wanting that person to be on this grant and then highlight their SAPS duties on the job description, that is that's best to do it that way.
And then Peggy mentioned, like, when you're doing your reimbursement request, there's that justification section. If you're adding new staff, remember that it's almost like you're doing that initial budget all over again, right? So you need to include, if you have a new staff person, what percentage of, not only what percentage is on the grant, but what percentage is direct services versus services and activities in support of direct services. So make sure you include that information, just like you're doing that original budget.
Mhm. Okay. And if you do a budget adjustment, do you have to wait for full approval to submit an RFR? So if you're doing a budget adjustment, that money won't actually move and be available to you until it's approved. So it's best, if you want to do a budget adjustment that is going to impact your RFR, do it 3 days before, a few days before, so that we can go in and approve it. So when you go in to do your RFR, you'll have that full amount in the line item that you wanted to move money into. That makes sense? Okay. Okay. Did I miss any questions? Yeah, if you have trouble with an RFR and you're right at the deadline, I would do the saps@tasa.org and instead of the support online, because we'll get that faster and be able to respond to you faster. Okay.
All of you should be able to access your portal at this point. I would strongly encourage you, if you haven't gone on there yet, to try to do it in the next day or two and reach out and let us know if you can't. I know we have, not to single you out, but Chrisanne, I know that you guys are new grantees. You should have received an email inviting you to set up your account and set up a password. If you didn't, email us and let us know, and we can go in and you get an email from Salesforce itself asking you to kind of set up your account and your password. Once you do that, and you're able to get in, I have actually logged in as you, and I know you'll be able to see. Oh, great.
Oh, good. Okay,
Good.
great. Okay. Good. And I just put the link to the portal in the chat again, if anybody wants to like click on it and put it as a bookmark if you haven't already. Okay.
And we'll get that third-party documentation form up tomorrow at the latest, because I know that reimbursement is coming soon. So if you've provided any direct assistance to survivors, you need to get that form turned in by the early part of next week. So we'll get that put up on Friday. by tomorrow at the latest.
So I'm going to stop sharing and go back to the presentation. And so in the presentation, which you are going to get the slides, there's a whole bunch of information about the Salesforce walkthrough in written form, and just know you'll get that. I'm not going to go through all of it because we did all of it like online, but you'll have it written down as you get the slides. Okay, Annette, back to you.
So technical assistance, at least quarterly. So most of the time I don't even need to schedule this because folks end up calling me or emailing me at least once a quarter about something. And so it doesn't matter whether I initiated or you initiated it. If you need technical assistance, let me know. And if I haven't heard from you, I will end up reaching out to see if you need anything or talk to you about your report or ask you some questions. So just be prepared for that. And like I said, many of you contact me several times a month. So we'll consider that TA. TA is available more frequently if you request it. So don't hesitate to let me know if you need something. Regardless of how many times you've already contacted me. That's what I'm here for. So I want to hear from you if you need anything at all. I can be reached. That's my cell phone number, 512-785-8645. If you feel more comfortable calling than emailing, or you just need to hear from somebody pretty quickly, you can reach me there as well. So, and I check my email quite frequently. So, I don't think I'm that hard to get a hold of. Generally, even I don't have good work-life balance, so I'm even pretty good at about answering things at 10 o'clock at night and on a Sunday afternoon. So let me know if you need anything.